Hello and welcome again. It is Friday, and you are together with me, Biliana, and the Legacy Changemaker broadcast. We are here once again to showcase changemakers who are doing special things to push forward a more prosperous, peaceful, hopeful, and people and planet centered world. So let me tell you who are we going to have a chat with today. We are going to have a chat with Silvano Lieger. He is the executive director at Sentience Politics, a political NGO in the area of animal welfare and sustainability in Switzerland. His organization has launched popular initiatives on sustainable nutrition and is currently working on a federal initiative to abolish factory farming, as well as on a cantonal initiative on fundamental rights of non-human primates. Silvano is heavily involved in systemic change work, as promoted by Collaboratio Helvetica, and I hope you'll be able to hear more about that at the end of our conversation. Today, we are going to have a very special chat, and the chat is going to be around why what we eat matters. Right, Silvano?
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome. Thank you for joining us. And as I just said, we are going to talk about why what we eat matters. So where are we going to start? What do you suggest?
I think it's a very broad topic, and I think it's important to figure out like why food is relevant. Food is something that is touching our lives every day, multiple times, and it's a vastly interconnected system around the world, the entire food system, and it has an aspect of animal welfare to it. It has an aspect of sustainability, so it's very very vast, and that's kind of what we're trying to tackle with our organization and with me personally with my systemic change work, to make this entire system more sustainable and to make it more friendly towards animals.
Beautiful. And when you mean this entire system, what exactly do you mean? Can you dive a little bit deeper?
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about the food system, there's many players involved. Of course, there's the retail sector, there's the producers, there's also the administration, the government of a certain nation that has an impact on policy, on how food is produced, how it's distributed, and what people have access to, what kind of food. And in this system at the moment, and that's kind of what we're focusing on. So our organization is focusing on factory farming. In the system at the moment, animals are very much a product, a source of food, and we don't really respect their dignity, I want to say. So this is something that we target specifically because we believe that an animal should have permanent access to the outdoors, for example. They should have enough space to live. They should not be bred in a way that they're going to die very, very young already, sometimes before they're slaughtered, just because their bodies are completely have been modified over generations. It's a very difficult topic because it targets us very personally and culturally, of course, and yet it's very important to talk about it, and it's very important for us to change it long term.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. When in the introduction, I was mentioning non-human primates, and now you're talking about animals. Can you tell us how you bring those two together?
Yes. So normally, this is easier to just mention animals, but normally I refer to non-human animals, implying that the biological fact that we are animals too. So there's human animals, there's non-human animals. And we have an initiative in Basel that's working towards fundamental rights for non-human primates. So again, we are primates and there are non-human primates, about 300 species. And so our goal with that is just to change the narrative, I guess. In a lot of the discussion about animal welfare, we talk, as I said, we talk about the welfare of an animal, we talk about animal protection. But in that system, to a certain degree, the animal is still an object that is part of of our lives. Like they belong to humans to a certain degree. And as soon as we change the narrative and talk about rights and say this is a sentient being that's also where the name Sentience Politics comes from. So a sentient being that is able to suffer, that is able to love, to think. We have to have a conversation about a rights-based approach, and should this individual have certain rights to life, to not be hurt physically or mentally. And that's kind of the discussion that we're starting now in Switzerland is really speeding up. A lot and more people are talking about this, and that's something that the people of one part of Switzerland are going to vote on in a few months, actually.
Great. How did you come to this realization? Tell me the story.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a very different life a few years ago, I got to say. I worked in advertising, and I worked for big corporations. I want to say I worked for power brands, I worked for beverage companies, and so for me it was I lived with a couple of people in Vienna back then. I was living in Austria, and they were vegetarian and vegan, and I kind of got sucked into it, and I learned a lot about like animal welfare topics, animal rights topics. And then one day I sat down and I watched this movie. The movie is called Earthlings, and I wasn't really prepared for it, I'm going to be honest. But it shook me to the core. So it's a movie that displays the way that factory farms operate in Australia specifically. But I want to say that a lot of the practices that happen in Australia at the current time can absolutely be compared to what we see in Europe at present. So it kind of showed all the different ways that different species of animals are being used in quite explicit footage. And I want to say it mentally changed me. Like I think I had to take a break during the movie once. I had to go for a walk just to calm down, and I came back and I finished it. And yeah, I haven't touched any animal product since. So really, like, it has really changed my life. And from there, a lot of transformation has happened also in my work, because again, like, then I had this knowledge and I read about it, watched movies about it, and I went back to work, still working for these beverage companies and this car company. And I have this one particular memory, actually. So I was in the office. It was late at night. It was 11:30 on a Friday. We had to finish up a presentation for a client that we'd have to show them on Monday morning. And I was there with two members of my team. And we were working on this presentation simultaneously. And one team member, something didn't work. And she started crying. She was upset. It was late. She was tired. And I remember this particular moment very well, because I went over to her and I told her, it's fine, we're going to figure this out. And then I asked myself what I was doing with my life, because it didn't feel like I had an impact. It didn't feel like I changed anything. And I also realized that I really don't care about this beverage company. I really don't care whether they sell more, more beverages in the next quarter. So I had this little crisis of meaning. And I quit my job quite quickly after that, like 2 weeks after, and traveled to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I'm happy I found it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this very personal story. It touched me deeply, and I got some goosebumps. Since you've been through this transformation yourself, and since you've started working on the topic of non-human welfare, what has been the most difficult for you? What change has been the most difficult to bring about?
So I think, first of all, I think everyone who works with in social justice knows that change is always difficult. So there's always this tendency to stick with the status quo because we just know it. I think the challenge has been a very personal one for me too. A friend of mine always refers to this, to keeping your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. So kind of don't lose your vision where you actually want to go, which can be a radical change towards the status quo. So for example, fundamental rights for non-human animals, which is a big change towards the discussion we have right now. But always, keep your feet on the ground. So remember that, for example, now we work in politics, right? So it's a reality that we have to navigate the current political sphere. So I have to understand people who fundamentally disagree with me. I have to talk to them. I need to understand their position, and they're also humans. I don't believe in evil people, for example, right? So I just believe in people that have different opinions, different experience in life. So I think I can learn from them, and I need to be able to navigate a system where they are a part of the conversation. And I think this is the most difficult for many people who like myself, are to a certain degree, we have a certain, picture of the world that we want to bring into being. And it's, we have to translate that somehow. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Really amazing. I love the idea that we need to bring into the conversation people we fundamentally disagree with, and nevertheless have those conversations and discover how we can move forward together. We have a comment from one of our, here it is, Michaela. She says, you talk about the initiative for the rights of non-human primates. What is this all about? Can one read something about it, since it is not directly linked to the food talk you are having? Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. So it's true. It's kind of two separate conversations, but they are very linked. So the Non-Human Primates Initiative is an initiative in the Swiss canton of Basel, Basel City. It's going to be coming to a vote in February of next year, we assume. So I mean, you can read all about that on primate-initiative.ch, and there's also an English website if you're not a native German speaker. Fundamentally, what we want is the right for non-human primates in the cantonal constitution of Basel to life and to not have to endure bodily or mental harm. So kind of for bodily and mental integrity, we call it. And so that's kind of a basic fundament. They're not going to have human rights. They're not going to be able to, I don't know, get married, have to pay taxes, whatever. It's just the basic protection that we should grant them. That's what we're trying to achieve there. Any support is very welcome.
Thank you so much. And let me build a little bit upon Michaela's comment. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are listening or who will be listening later and will be thinking, but animals are just part of the of the food chain. What do you make out of it? What is your argument?
Yeah, so I guess historically, that has been true, of course, like we humans had to feed ourselves, and that has been true. But when we look at the current food system, the current way that animal products are being produced, it's far removed from nature. So it's just not the same thing. Again, it's an industry, it's factories, So like the argument of something being natural here cannot really be brought forward, like the tools, like I wouldn't be able to kill a cow with my hands and eat it, it's not in my nature. So it has been this has evolved a lot with society, and what we absolutely need are certain nutrients. I'm not going to debate that we need certain nutrients. Do we need them from animal products? Absolutely not. There's other ways to get these nutrients. So I believe because we have evolved as a people, as humans, it's also time to adapt the systems around us that produce the food that we need. Also, it's an absolute necessity. If we look at the climate impact, so just in Switzerland, 85% of emissions are linked to animal farming. So just this sheer fact is very important to keep in mind, because the way we currently produce food is not sustainable, and we do need to change it if we want to meet the goals of the Agenda 2030, for example, and just create a sustainable future for next generations.
Okay, thank you so much. Now let's move to another topic, and the topic is, what have been some of your big successes?
So I want to say, so we've had initiatives in the past on sustainable nutrition in different cantons and different cities on the in the public sphere, so like in schools and in cafeterias. And there, a few laws have been adapted in some Swiss cities, for example, in Zurich and Lucerne. Changes have been made that has a long-term impact. But I want to say that the biggest impact we've had so far is not yet changed laws, but a lot of the narrative and this discourse has been shaped by our work. So, for example, our initiative on factory farming, and actually also the primate initiative, have gathered a lot of international attention. So there were articles in the UK, in Australia, all over Europe. We've been interviewed from people from Slovakia, from Austria, Germany. So I guess the biggest impact so far, until we have the votes, has really been just the narrative, the discussion about it. Factory farming is much more prominent in the Swiss I want to say, consciousness in the last few years, because this discussion has accelerated. Of course, there was also with other factors, the climate movement that really showcased like the impact of animal farming and factory farming on the climate. But also a lot of it is due to our work, the work of our alliance partners, and many other people around the country and around Europe, actually.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I know that you were part of one of the collaboratio helvetica catalyst labs. Is this where you kind of opened up your mind to the system that needs to be changed? Because at the moment you're bringing two really different layers. You're bringing the simple habit of eating 3 times a day and the politics around it together. So can you tell us a little bit, how did you connect those two levels?
That's a good question. It's also very difficult to say. So I think fundamentally, if we want to see different results outside, in policy and in the way that our society is structured, we also need to look within, and we need to look at like, okay, what kind of beliefs do I hold? What kind of paradigms do I act from? So I think that the work of when we talk about Collaboratio Helvetica, which is doing a lot of systemic change work. So we're not talking just about one policy. We're talking about how do we change the entire system, and which is something that is frequently talked about, and not many people know how to do it, really. And I'm not saying I know, because I'm learning, and there's the best guess that we have at the moment. But I think what I've learned in the last year, 2 years working on this is it's so important to talk to people you disagree with. You cannot change a system only with people who share your opinion. So this has really transformed my activism, because before, I was kind of part of a bubble of people who kind of agreed with me, and then we tried to get our voice heard somehow. But it's really different when you try to sit down with people like your biggest, I don't want to use the word enemies because I don't believe in enemies, but people who just disagree with you and want the status quo or want it more extreme even. And first of all, the information you get from them, like as people, and what you can even learn from them, and then reel them in somehow. Because what I've learned, I think that was a very important learning for me when I talked to many stakeholders in the entire food system in Switzerland. So like, be it academia, be it meat producers, retailers, I talked to dozens of people. And what I learned was that no one actually wants factory farms, which is a key insight, no? Like, no one wants factory farms, but still the system produces it as an outcome. Why? And if you know this, you can really work with people, and you can understand, okay, it's a systemic issue. It's not an issue of this one particular player. It's a systemic issue that we need to address collectively.
Thank you so much. We have a challenger here. We have Michaela, who has another challenge for you.
Yes,
and
absolutely. Go for it.
There we go. There she is. Michaela asks you, why stop at non-human animals? What about plants and mycelia? Are they not sentient as well? Even if in a different way. And then it continues. Just give me a second. Oh, sorry. Sure. There we go. And if you open this up, what will we eat then?
Well, that's a good question. So when we talk about sentience, you can really kind of pull a line, more or less. So sentience is the capacity to be aware of feelings and sensations. And the current scientific argument is that plants, while they can, for example, react to stimuli, they're not sentient. So they don't have a central nervous system, they don't have a brain, they cannot reflect on certain experiences, right? Can they react? Absolutely. So the argument that we make is, who is able to suffer? So far, scientifically, it's proven that, for example, cows, chickens, the animals we eat, they're absolutely capable of suffering. They have really strong reactions. So, and even the argument, let's take the argument a little further. Let's say plants could suffer, which they can arguably not. Let's say they could. Even then, we feed so many of the plants that we grow directly to animals to then eat the animals. So it would be still better to just not eat the animals. So there's this argument that can be made. And when it comes to what would we eat, again, we need certain nutrients, and we can absolutely get all of those nutrients from plants. We would eat mostly plants, basically. And there's many different products coming up now. The markets are quite saturated with alternatives to classic meat or cheese dishes. So a lot can be done there. And I just want to highlight again that it's an absolute necessity that we change the way we farm, because it's simply not sustainable.
Yeah, and just to add on, factory farming does not necessarily mean, I mean, moving away from factory farming does not necessarily mean not eating meat for those who want to continue
Oh,
eating
absolutely.
meat,
Yeah.
right?
No, absolutely. It's not the same at all. So like we're talking about factory farms, which in Switzerland are, for example, you can have up to 27,000 chickens in one barn. And after our initiative, more specifically, we envision that there's going to be about 2,000 chickens. So, there's still going to be chickens. It's just going to be much less, So that's, so the higher quality animal welfare is just an important aspect of it. Animals should have access to the outdoors. They should be able to, see the sky. They should be able to have enough space to, to not basically die before they're even slaughtered, because that's happening still quite a lot.
Yes, we need a little bit of dignity for all of us, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Quality of life matters. And this is a little bit of a luxurious topic, because you live in Switzerland, I live in Switzerland, and we do have the luxury of thinking about those things, whereas other people don't. So,
absolutely.
Michaela is on again. She's asking, can we know a little bit more about Collaboratio Helvetica?
Yes, sure. So Collaboratio Helvetica is an amazing organization working around, I want to say, building partnerships around the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals, and actually implementing the Agenda 2030, which was created for these SDGs in Switzerland. So they're convening different stakeholders around different SDGs. They're helping people like myself who work on specific SDGs understand more systemic work. So it's also something I'm still learning, and like, how do I convene a system? How do I actually approach people that I wouldn't have thought of maybe before, like, why is it important to do that? And how do I convene them and figure out a way to collectively make a positive impact towards this Agenda 2030? And Collaboratio Helvetica is doing an incredible job in, for example, with the Catalyst Lab. So their idea is that you have certain people that can, with their teams, act as catalysts for different SDGs. So they can, just by the way that they function, bring upon a lot of change around them in their entire system. So they're doing this lab for people where you learn how to work systemically. And this is what I did last year. It has fundamentally changed the way that I approach any problem or any challenge that I have. And there's a new Catalyst Lab coming up, and people can apply for that right now. I encourage everyone to check it out and see if it's something for you. If you're based in Switzerland, I can really recommend it.
Yes, so as far as I know about Collaboratio Helvetica, just to add on, I think it's a 6-month process or a year?
It's a little, I think it was like 7 months, but there's a lot of help even before and after, and there's this community, like, so they try to assemble people, kind of show, like, all of the different SDGs are there with different people, and you go through this collectively. So you also learn a lot about other challenges. For example, for me, people working in integration, people working in, circular economy. So it's very interesting to kind of feed off each other's, learnings as well. So it's a very good experience.
Okay, and they have an application open. As far as I know, it's up to, you can apply until the 19th of September. So if you're interested, please check their website. However, Silvano, let's go to the topic of eating and the fact that it matters. So now that we've kind of discussed a little bit your story and discussed a little bit what have you done and what have you learned, what are the very practical tips and tricks you would like to convey to simple people like me that we can integrate in our everyday life?
So I think I'm not going to ask people to just go vegan, for example. What I would ask people to do, though, is to research. What are current practices in animal farming, for example. How is it done in my region? How is it done in my country? And like, what does it actually look like? And if you go into that, you will see that a lot has been changed. Has been quite industrialized. And then I would say, just figure out how you feel about that, like consuming these kind of products, supporting this kind of industry financially, and yeah, I guess figure out, does it align with my values? Is this something that I want to support? And if it doesn't, then make a consequence. Maybe really reduce the intake of meat that you have. Maybe do it twice a week, or maybe cut out meat and just eat cheese and eggs still. I think this is something that we have to look at individually, and of course there should be more education from the government as well. So it's difficult to just say, okay, you just do that. I think it's a systemic problem. I think there's many players like the retail sector as well. So it's difficult to say you just do that, because it's not just our job. It's a systemic problem that everyone should address collectively.
However, we do have the right to vote with our money, right? But in addition to voting with our money, we can also, those who have the right to vote in Switzerland, I'm not one of them, but when can they vote, and on what kind of initiatives?
So the factory farming initiative that asks for these higher standards for animal welfare is going to be voted on probably in 2023. So we don't know it for sure yet, because the process in Switzerland is quite tedious, quite long, it's very complicated. And the non-human primate initiative that is in Basel specifically, so probably only a small part of our viewers today will be able to vote on that. That's going to be in February of next year.
Okay, well, that's all from me. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your passion, sharing your learning. And I wish you all the best with the initiatives you're pushing forward. I wish all the best also to all the stakeholders you're involving in the conversation, and of course the ones who disagree with you less.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yes, it has been a real pleasure. Have a lovely weekend, and good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was it. Thank you very much. See you again next Friday.